16th of June. It might be the 17th. It is actually the 17th. And we are headed now from Brunswick, Georgia. Apparently the home of Brunswick stew. But there's 2 locations in town that boast to have the oldest Brunswick stew pot. That is a stew with barbecue, lima beans, corn. It's good. So I'm crossing this bridge. It's super high. The clouds look amazing. I'm coming from Beverly Buchanan's Marsh Ruin, which is, like I said, in Brunswick, Georgia. And I'm headed south to America Beach. And here I will visit a sculpture garden of a fellow who has a personal shrine to Jesus and Mary and all them. And I will also go to the beach that was traditionally like a black vacation spot. Of course, I'd never heard of it, but let's see what it's like. I haven't really spent much time in Florida at all. If you could see where I'm at right now, it's splendid. I mean, this bridge is over marshland. The clouds are fantastic, and the shadow from the bridge is making stripes on the highway. I can't talk about it or I might crash. The speed limit's 50, I'm going 60. I should have started this recording in the beginning of my trip, so I'm just going to take a moment to recap what has happened so far for myself as well, because I've been feeling a little bit like, okay, here I am going to all these places. Okay, oh yeah, I'm going to make drawings or whatever, but I don't really, maybe it's a skill thing, maybe it's a whatever self-consciousness thing, but I don't feel that I can capture what I find so fantastic about this area in a pencil drawing, and I'm not somebody who's working really with paint, so I figure that this description mode might help a little better, although it is my a big belief of mine that, maybe a belief is too strong, but I was thinking about it today. Just physically putting my body in these various places is important for me. I've learned so much about the area that I grew up in and all kinds of possibilities of my past. Of course, it's a sort of blank slate, and some you can say that's a tragedy, but in other cases you can see that as a very big opportunity. I would never want someone who was not in a position to have had their history completely erased make that point, but I think I can say it. All right, just a quick list of where we've stopped so far. Shangri-La Village, Whirligig Park. We have been to the Bellamy House. We have been to the museum in Elizabeth City. We've been to the Great Dismal Swamp. We have been to Supply, North Carolina, to see Mary's Gone Wild. Mary Paulson and Paul Paulson out there in the country living a fucking dream. With the Doll Museum, which just opened on Friday. Last Friday. So it's been open a week. I was one of the first visitors. I have a recording of about half hour of Mary explaining all the dolls in that museum and her inspiration behind what she does. I'm really interested in these American cheap steeples of all these churches out in the country, and I would like to make some sculptures based on them that are lit by UV lights that have the appearance of the lights near the baseball stadium, the baseball field that I saw this morning, which has ruins of tabby concrete, slave chimneys. And I don't want this to seem like, oh my God, slaves, but that's just like a fact of it. So I'm trying to figure out a way to I don't know, have the right amount of focus on the situation, but also take a look at the ingenuity. Maybe that's not a fine desire, but we shall see. Anyway, coming down after being in Hilton Head at the Fish Hall Plantation, where I made videos, Um, I was in Charleston, but I didn't see nothing in Charleston. After Charleston, I went to the Oyatunde Oyatunde village in Sheldon. Well, technically not in Sheldon. It's actually apparently a sovereign. It's apparently a sovereign land, but I gotta look into it because it seemed in disrepair. I'm gonna be honest. It seemed in disrepair. It's $25 first of all, and for being I don't know. I gotta look into it more, and I'm trying to like figure out if my issue is like I don't know. I don't know. I can't explain it. I'll have to talk to you more about that later. Anyway, I did visit, and I was glad to see it. I was glad to see it. Let's put it like that. So yeah, after that, I went to basically what. Okay, so when I was a kid, I knew Hilton Head as a place where upper middle class white families would go to vacation. And it turns out that there's a hell of a lot of black history there. Mitchellsville is the first, freeman settlement in the United States, and that's right there around the corner from whatever, Harris Teeter or whatever. An interesting thing about Hilton Head is it seems as though the city has ordinances on commercial buildings. So whereas when you're out in the country, like down 17 before you get to Charleston, you have tons of ads for sweetgrass, sweetgrass basket weavers and people selling peaches and all kinds of stuff, cremations, whatever, stones, just all kinds of stuff, blueberries. But once you get into Hilton Head proper, all the commercial things, even those that are like chains, like a Wendy's or whatever, their signage is all the same, this sort of beige. It's got like a business park feel, but the trees save it because you have these big, beautiful trees. I mean, the landscape is fucking spectacular. Anyway, so that catches us up, really. My biggest observation so far is like this notion of nostalgia is like not true. Because these things that people think, oh, that's old timey or whatever, this is people's like real lives. They're like living in it, like really. And I don't mean that like, oh wow, that's not to exoticize it, but it's very American. Very American. I was thinking earlier or a few days ago, America is not the best place to live, but I gotta tell you, it really is the best place. I mean, I've seen parts of this part of the country, if you can imagine that have really blown my mind during this trip. And it continues. Okay, signing off. Headed south to America Beach. Yee, yee, yee.
Welcome to the Listening Tide. Our guest for this episode and who you've just been listening to is Alex Phillips.
Hello.
Welcome to the living room, Alex.
Oh, thank you.
That sounds like the beginning of quite a journey. Actually, it sounds like quite a journey had already been had. There's more journey to it, which we'll get to, I suppose, in a moment. That moment you were there in the car, it sounded like a sort of maybe not a breaking point, but there was an initial realization of where you were at, the things you had seen, possibly already inspiring things to come. Tell us a little bit more about the trip itself. How did you end up in this car driving over the bridge?
Well, I planned this trip actually the winter before, and I laid out a plan, like a research plan that was supported by CBK. Thank you to them. But the idea to take the trip had been kind of ruminating for a while. Yeah, I'm not a very good driver, so there's like that whole part. There was like really like a learning part for that. But the trip itself, as far as the content, I was really just curious to get a sense of the type of visual landscape that I grew up around, to sort of revisit familiar things with a new sense of perspective that living away from the country has given me.
Thereby, like returning to it and
Yeah.
seeing if you see and hear things differently again.
Yeah, and returning with a new appreciation, and I guess is sort of like, like the old thing, like when you miss something,
Hmm.
or like whatever, what is it?
That's
Like,
what you meant by nostalgia when you mentioned it?
no, like missing, like something makes the heart grow, absence makes the heart grow fonder.
And distance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and distance. So I feel like being here in the Netherlands, and
Because you're based in Rotterdam.
yeah, I'm based in Rotterdam, and I've been working in the Netherlands really since around 2017. And I guess change of scenery highlights particular things about anybody's practice. And I found myself tracing a lot of those things back to where I grew up.
Mhm.
And so I was curious to look at it through that.
And your initial plan was to make drawings?
Well, that's what I told them. I mean, I have made a lot of drawings in the past in other trips, but I have to say those are drawings of history that's less alive. I think that's what I found to be a challenge on this trip. In this case, I was overwhelmed with how, kind of what I was saying in that, how close history feels to progress
Right.
in the United States, and especially outside of like a city. Right? Everybody goes to New York, LA, Chicago, but I think these roads leading into the cities have a character that I just don't really see in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners at home to understand, for this episode, Alex, you offered a lot of audio material.
Yes.
We'll get to a very specific part of that later. Some of the other meanderings, and exactly what you're saying, they really are sort of like everyday life that comes by. So a lot of this is, as you say, it's also the real lives of people. It isn't just a historical setting constantly.
No, not at all. I mean,
but that's also what you looked for. So how these histories that are relevant to this specific area do or don't tell the story of that, and also in relationship to your own history, to the area itself.
Yes. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, but I mean, that's what I was looking for. Or you get like a hunch. I mean,
right.
Or see things that suggest there's more to the story, and it comes in all things. Maybe like news articles, maybe like other artworks that exist, right? Like in that recording, I'm leaving that piece by the Beverly Buchanan piece, and that work is placed there because of a specific story that I didn't know about until I encountered that work. So there's all these different ways into like understanding history. I feel like,
And just for that, because I don't think we really mentioned it yet, and it's important. What's your relationship to North Carolina?
Oh, so my father's side of the family, they're all from there. I wasn't really born in Winston-Salem, but we moved there when I was like in third grade. So I was like reared there. I went to high school and everything there. And my mom still lives down there, and all the things, all the formative things happened there. Yeah.
Was the confrontation big in the end? Like what you took back? Maybe it's not even a confrontation, but is that sort of like juxtaposition of the Netherlands and Europe and that?
Oh, I mean,
formative
it's huge.
In all of it?
Yeah, I mean, it, like I said, it's not, I mean, I say it in there, like I am happy not to live in the United States at this time, but I'm also happy to be from there. I think that one thing that I would say I took from it, not so much of course the places are different, but of course we want them different, right? It's fine to have places be different. I would never expect places to be the same, but one thing that I did, or that I found myself thinking about a lot, is who is allowed to have like kind of pride for where they're from. And that's an interesting thing, because I feel like within the United States, there's one of the few things maybe that we're a little bit nuanced at, is understanding that like pride in your history or where you're from doesn't like mean like nationalism necessarily. And so,
Meaning it's often cultural.
yeah, it might be something like a smaller story, like a more personal story that makes you proud to be where you're from,
Okay.
and not like a, what about the, not about how the place votes or whatever.
Right.
So that is something that I definitely feel is misunderstood maybe over here. And I feel like meeting people or witnessing certain histories or just paying more attention to different storylines within the South has made me more reassured that it's okay.
And a lot of these storylines were told to you through, call it like small initiatives, museums.
Like where I'm the only visitor in forever and they're super nice to you. These kind of museums, like you're not from around here, huh? Kind of museum, and then somebody wants to tell you the next place to go. Very welcoming. Probably boring if you're from the area, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah, mostly small things. And then some things that I found kind of by myself, but not really. Like this roadside atlas. There's a great app that you can find weird stuff, but those aren't really part of the main story.
What was like a good museum? Like a good story there?
The museum in Elizabeth City, I think, is great.
What state is that?
That's in North Carolina. So I started...
Yeah, give us a little geography.
Okay, so I left Winston-Salem, which is in the Piedmont. So that's in the middle of the state of North Carolina. And North Carolina is, well, they were the last to join the Confederacy, but they're 2 below the Mason-Dixon line. So you have Virginia. So I was going up to Virginia to the border of North Carolina and Virginia. And there you have Elizabeth City, which is actually where my father went to college too. So there's like a lot of autobiographical sort of meanderings in this too. But so there you have the Great Dismal Swamp, which is an interesting, we can't really go into it now, but it's an interesting thing to look into as like an important land feature in the early United States, and about how people navigated like crazy landscape. But the museum there in Elizabeth City has like local museum stuff. But when I was there, I saw like a maybe 50-year-old guy, and he had his son, maybe he was like 47. He had his son with him who was maybe 7 or 8. Right. And they were going through an exhibit all about farming in the area because it's an agricultural area. And, first they had something with the Native Americans and like pots. And so the guy's explaining to his son, okay, I'm a farmer. My daddy was a farmer and his daddy was a farmer, right? So the guy says, yeah, you see this? This is all the tools from the Native Americans. So then they came and took all their land. Isn't that something? Then he moves on to the early tools. And he's like, yep, and this is what they used to use. And can you believe that? They took all their land and then they made us work it. Isn't that something? But it wasn't with a sense of, it was just factual, right? So that museum has basic things that if you look at it from a certain perspective, you can learn a lot and you can also still be proud. So I like that museum.
There's a positivity in that, or just a reality? Maybe
there's a reality. There's a reality in it, and
is that what you meant by when you said, what you just mentioned, slavery? That's not what I'm interested in.
Yeah, because there's a reality, like that's fact, not feeling, and I'm interested in understanding more of the feeling, and not the feeling that comes of it, and like what people have done with that situation and how it's been processed, but alongside and with a strong emphasis on the other side, instead of sticking with just like the bad, sad parts, because that is like true. But if we do one chapter more, maybe we could all, I don't know. It makes me understand it better. And those things are also true. So why highlight one side? It just seems rigged. Sorry to say that. It sounds like, but it does.
But it's also looking for it. If I understand correctly, what you're saying, it's not necessarily in any way sort of retroactively looking at things differently or wanting to do that. It's accepting the reality of slavery as it is, and still has its effects today
Yes.
and was.
Yes.
But alongside that, seeking, let's say, the resonances of it as a reality from which to move on, and how that moves on.
Yes, and here's what I have found time and time again, like whether it's from a lived experience going to seek it in this trip, or from a desk reading, there's so many stories of like resilience, of invention, of taking a real shit situation and transforming it. And I think that if you can tell the situation and the way that people were able to rise above in their personal situations, that you just have a fuller picture of the actual story.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah.
And that also offers it a larger view than just the aspect of slavery itself. I mean, that's, imagine something that you repeatedly and constantly are somehow surrounded with in where you were, but it's not the only story.
It's not the only story. And if I'm really honest, like, yes, I know it. I know the story, right? I didn't like live through that personally. I realize I'm saying this from a seat where I'm like free of any threat of bodily harm. Like, I understand I'm sitting here from a privileged position. I get that. But I also think that it behooves everybody to learn like the whole story, like the whole thing. So like
the story keeps growing as well. I mean, that's what you were searching for, I imagine. As you say, that museum has a father and a son stating the reality itself. They leave the museum and just like a lot of other people you've met.
Yeah, I mean, he walked through the whole thing. There's that museum exhibit ends with a, ice cream truck or a lunch counter, not an ice cream truck, a lunch counter, right? And it's the story of the sit-ins, right? That happened in Greensboro, North Carolina. Right. And the dad says, like, right, it goes through the war. Yeah. It goes also through World War. Through World War II. Right. And everybody went to fight. Then we ended in the lunch counter. And the dad's like, and can you imagine you wouldn't even be able to sit there after all that? Isn't that something? Right. But they were just going through the museum. See, nobody was feeling bad about themselves. It's just a fact. And then. And that's the part that I feel like is missing from a lot of the conversations, the and then part. Yeah. That's all.
Maybe let's let that be the lead in to one of the end ends. You got to, I mean, along the way, which happened after the last recording in the car, you met someone, which became a big part of the journey as well.
Yeah.
Joe Minter.
Yes.
I think before we listen, you should just say, who's Joe Minter? Like, give him a good example. Like, give him a good intro. Sorry.
Okay, Joe Minter is an artist working in Birmingham, Alabama, and I would call him an installation artist. He's a very skilled sculptor, and he has a bunch of property like near a cemetery in Birmingham, Alabama called the African Village in America. And there he makes artwork.
Lots of it from a lot of material.
Yes, he uses what he's got. I mean, he is very prolific, and like I said about Mary Paulson and Paul Paulson, he's out there from an artist's perspective, living the dream. He's inspired. He keeps himself busy. He grows. He uses all different kinds of things. Never satisfied, but very proud. I mean, that's what he's up to.
How'd you meet him? Because I think that maybe also says something about a little bit how this trip also works as a fluid thing.
Yeah, it was very fluid. It was very fluid, and that was also one of the big benefits of doing it by myself, I have to say, which I was really nervous about in the beginning, but in the end it was a really positive thing. But I knew I wanted to meet him, but I was a little apprehensive as far as like time of day, just because he's old. And I thought, I don't know. For some reason, I think you should visit old people in the morning. So it was kind of late. So I was going to visit another site. It was like June 19th, and I saw him sitting on a corner, like an intersection, just down the hill from where his place is, I found out later. And yeah, I parked the car, which I must say I wouldn't have been able to pull that maneuver if I hadn't been driving all that time.
Mhm.
So, you grow and can like achieve different things. So I
Right.
parked the car and came up on him, and he was sitting there with all these signs out to make a statement for Juneteenth. And yeah, that's how I met him. And then
Um,
we spent like 3 days together, like talking about art and life. And
You came back a few times.
yes, it's the only place that I stayed longer than one night during the trip.
All right, we're going to listen to a little bit of the first meeting.
Oh yeah, can I just say that if you have trouble with the record, like the quality, I apologize, but that's where the scene is set. The first meeting is at an intersection outdoors, so enjoy the texture.
Let me tell you about a touch of heart in my mama's favorite tooth. She used to cut out anywhere she found. And they went together, hearts to hearts. Now you find them more things in newspaper, you find them two hearts put together, you get heart to heart. Sweetest thing could ever touch a baby and treating the world like everything in it was a baby. I can't explain, but the only thing love a black man or African male is that mother. And she would go all the way to the end of the earth for it. And the thing about it, you got to always remember, what can you do to give back to the earth? You give your heart to the earth, because the earth have gave you its heart. And it ain't too much work that you can't do to appreciate that God give you a chance to be able to express yourself in a way where somebody can understand that you got something to say. And the best way to have something to say is to make something, produce something, and stand back and watch them look at it. No, you ain't done that. Hey, you get right back in the back.
always
And
say
look
that.
at one there and there.
I always say that when I
Look.
sit there and spy. I always say that. That's my favorite thing. And sometimes if I'm brave, I say, "What do you think?" And just let him tell me, and never tell him at all. Never say I made it or anything. What do you think?
In the crowd. The thing about it, everything I done been, I'm using what Jesus used. I call Jesus the streetwalker. Hey, every time you saw me was in the street healing, and then he took a crowd to the mountain. It's something about outside.
Yeah.
It's a picture that have never been drawn to understand, to be able where everybody could walk up and have a feeling, or when I walk away from it, I've been chained, and I'm chained for the best because what they have done for me is giving me the feel that somebody on the earth care. I like to see you standing behind them when they come into the people. And you stand back there and look out. I like to see that. Hey. And you walk up and say, hey, you walk up like this with your hand on your chin. With your sacrifice. I like to see that.
Oh man! If I ever have a show anywhere around here, I'll invite you. You can come and see for yourself. You can come see for yourself, man. But I mean, I'm sure you got people coming up to look at your stuff all the time. No, you got a lot of visitors, or not? You don't have people coming to visit you?
Yes. It's all over.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie about it.
Yeah.
It
So,
took up until the end to get to where I'm at.
when do people start coming to visit you?
Okay, Bill Arnett started dealing in right. Story down with Bill Arnett is he's a walking historian
Yeah.
collector.
Yeah.
Because he writes history and place. He went to Europe out around here somewhere. I think his family either had an old store or something around there. I think he got in school and went on to Europe and studied every kind of Hollywood, went to the Orient, or studied different religions and stuff, and come to pitch his tent in his neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Come across a foot, I think, or something in the magazine, saying, "What did this and that?" He headed with a GB.
Yeah, yeah.
I give Bill the.
That's the 90s then.
I give him the name of Trailblazer because he sacrificed his wife to put on the map that was left out of the museum. See, he gave the museum a lot of artwork to get in there. And people talk about he was a thief, but to me, he was a trailblazer. I can say.
All right. That's good to know, to set that. But people always think that, but that's because people think, I mean, I'm from down here. People think that people down here aren't smart enough to know where to put their stuff. So they always assume somebody's stealing. You know what I'm saying? It's something, you have the right to give your stuff if you want to give it. It's your stuff. You can give it.
Let me tell you something.
You know.
To get water from a well, you crime. Be a crime in the United States.
Yeah.
By dragging yourself in the back of the museum to the side of the museum. But see, the African himself is a whole of a history. Let me tell you how we is as a people. See, they thought we didn't know.
Yeah.
We used to make old fish out of fly. You know, old newspaper that started pasting it up all in the walls and crashing stuff inside the house to keep up with what was going on. And then everything that we had used in the back was a pile of history.
Yeah.
And come by your house and look at all that little junk pile up there. See, attachment to things that made us get to where we got have a stirring feel about it.
Yes.
Because you know how you can see all that piled up back there, but grandma could walk out there with that cane and pull that piece down. Boy, let me tell you a piece of history about that piece down.
Yeah.
That's a pile of junk. They say it's a pile of junk. But every society that had something buried some of what they had so it could be found.
Yeah.
Now, the art world, tell you how Bill made that big old book, Soul Gone
Yeah,
Deep.
yeah.
Look at that. He made that #2 book, Soul Gone Deep.
Yeah.
James Hunter put $1 million.
Yeah, I seen her with Lonnie Holly up there. They're friends.
Hey.
Can you imagine?
But she come through there. I'm an old veteran. Hey, she come through with a tour.
Here? Nuh-uh.
Yeah, what now that comes in.
Did you put on his suit, Joe? Did you dress out?
I don't know when they come to one, they come to one. I don't know.
It was intense with the traffic.
Yeah. It's like,
But there were a lot of significant things said, I think.
I agree. I mean, my problem with the first encounter is that I'm a little nervous. I'm not the best field recorder, I don't think, because I don't want to like intrude in people's space. So I was just out there with my phone, But I think if you can decipher it, he definitely hits on what I think are a lot of, well, it just sets the tone of what kind of mind you're dealing with.
So you mentioned, so what we have here is a man who has dedicated a large part of his life now to a sacred ground with a lot of material that he keeps building onto, metal, wood. And in this recording, he's also speaking about those histories that they buried. Every society has these histories, these materials.
Yes.
They carry their own histories.
Yes. And what's interesting about Mr. Minter's place is that he's actually literally, I don't know if it's clear, but his site is literally the cemetery, the Black Cemetery of Birmingham, Alabama. So I don't know if that's clear. So where his house is, which his father built, it's on a dead end, right? A different neighborhood, maybe you would call it like a cul-de-sac, but
Right.
yeah. And then cemetery
Hmm.
up on a hill, and it's the historical Black cemetery. So when he's talking about feeling the ancestors and buried, there's also a very literal sense of that
Yeah.
when you're there physically. But yes, so we're talking about somebody who's devoted their life and time to this endeavor.
So there's a spiritual aspect to it in the history of the peoples themselves that have been buried there, and there's his own sort of, and I don't know if these are right terms, but spirituality in the materials that he uses, and this you said at the beginning, kind of like an installational.
Yeah, I mean, it's
process.
sprawling. And he really likes it to be known that he's not like, going out to find all this. Like when his wife was alive, they would just go to flea markets. Like he buys stuff in bulk and stuff. So it's not like the sacredness of his materials comes from the way he uses it and the symbolism that he imbues and the connection that he makes to narratives that he wants to communicate is the way that I understood it. So it's not, oh, this special grass from this special place, but it's more like, if you look at images of his work, he always uses chains, right? So that is a very literal, but also a very useful sculptural tool, right? So there's a duality in what he's doing as far as the content and the narrative, and then the way that squares in his material universe. And what I will say is when you look at that, it's like, if you look at like some kind of high Baroque church or something, and at first it looks like totally crazy, but then when you look, there's like a very advanced internal logic, and that's what's going on with him.
Did you get a sense in any way of that logic in the conversations you had?
Oh yes, I mean, he's very aware as far as like what he's building. Okay, there's the whole God part and history part, but there's also something that's
he calls Jesus the streetwalker.
Yeah, right. So I mean, and he's interesting because he's knows the Bible, but that's also a really interesting book, right? Depending on where you come from, what angle you want to come to it at. But as a narrative, that's like a very impressive book. I've never read it, but I admitted that to him like sometime at the end of the first meeting, right? Because a lot of the things he has written on his work have biblical references, and I'm like, Joe, like I wasn't raised in the church. And he's like, me neither. So I mean,
he also has other historical references.
Yes, he has other. He's into, of course, the spirit of agape, right? And histories with like, he was telling me this thing at the top of the monument at the Washington Mall. There's like a small sculpture of a Native American woman. So he's into all sorts of narratives of like essentially pride and triumph.
That's an interesting part actually, because I did listen to when he was speaking about the Native American at the top of the Capitol building, and I was wondering, was it a Native American who was depicted in some way or illustrated their history on the top of the Capitol building, or was he referring to the language? Because he says "we the people," that's a Native American. That's a Native American language.
Yes, I think he's talking.
In other words, saying like, you know what I mean, that there is a colonization, obviously, that had taken place, but also this sort of overbridging of one language into the other.
That's what I think is the most impressive, or one of the most impressive aspects. If we, I mean, of course, they're intertwined, but if we step aside of what he's achieved in his sculptures and as an artist, if you just look at, some of the things he says, like, I think we'll hear it later, like to, love everything in here or treat everything like it's a baby, like these sort of sentiments of pretty radical, like care and acceptance. I don't know. I think it's...
you begin saying, what do you give back to the earth?
Yeah, I mean...
Also has that history.
Yeah.
What do you bury again?
Yeah, it has that... I just think there's like an optimism that I can only attribute like to of course, a lived life. But I think from my perspective, of course, I'm coming to it as an artist, but I'm like, in all these practices that I encountered during the trip, it seems to be a very particular flavor of like sustaining force.
How do you mean that?
The choice to make and devote your time to making art, if you do it seriously, and I'm not saying I'm there or something, but like I observed it definitely in Joe, I observed it in Mary. Like if you devote, it's a sort of weird fountain of energy or something. Right. It's really weird to see, and to me that was really moving. So I mean that's like a big takeaway, and I don't really know how that happens. A lot of these people attribute it to God, but it's, when I think about it, if you're raised in a place where where discussion of art as like a transcendent thing isn't in the conversation, like God is the most common name for like the unnameable. So it makes sense that a lot of these practices are linked to that higher thing. But I don't know, I have a suspicion that they don't really mean God, because also most of these people aren't going to church actively, which is also interesting. Right. I don't know, maybe I'm rambling, but
I don't think it's rambling actually, because that church, so at a certain point he does speak about the possibly misunderstanding between you and he when he speaks about the top of his own mound, the ancestral mound. There is I don't remember if it was a statue of American Indian. What's on the top? Sorry.
On the top of in the Washington Monument?
No,
at his place, we're just literally on top of a hill. The cemetery is raised ground.
Yeah, because he does speak about being high enough, and you referred to the altitude situation of it, and I believe that he's really speaking about the spiritual aspect of it.
Look, I have to say that like it should be known that there's, Joe is sober. I was sober during the whole thing, but I think like there are some times that we're talking on different planes.
Sure.
But I think that if you can hold the pace with somebody even through that, then it's like, at the end, you also come to like a different type of understanding.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, he says a lot of stuff in what we just heard too, aside from, he says a lot of kind of practical things also about what he thinks about actually the art world and how, what it takes to move a vision through that, those channels.
Yeah.
I mean,
you, both of you are laughing at a certain point about your work being looked at, and then standing back and seeing what people see in your work when they're looking at it.
Yeah.
You're even mentioning, that you just pretend that you're not even the artist, and you just ask somebody, so what do you think?
Yeah, he got a kick out of that. Yeah. He got a kick out of that. And that's like...
He says elsewhere also, art is a strange bunch.
Yeah, artists, are a strange bunch. And I think that there's just... to be somebody working by yourself to your own rhythm, but also have an awareness of how you land in the world outside of your world that you've chosen to occupy yourself, I think that's really a brilliant mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that his willingness also to, in a certain way, defend himself through this discussion of Bill Arnett, who is the art historian who compiled like the original collection that made the Souls Grown Deep Foundation.
This is who he's talking about in this recording.
Yes, he talks about Bill Arnett, and essentially what he's talking about is like ownership and agency, because he's saying that Bill Arnett was kind of crucified as being a thief, as collecting this stuff, and being sort of the white guy who's putting all this work from Black Southern artists in museums. But Joe makes it very clear that he thinks that he's like a trailblazer, and he even connects Arnett's, I guess, strategy in getting that stuff into museums. He even connects that to the way he understands Black people in America, how they infiltrate, you
Mhm.
know, for lack of better
Sure.
word, you know, and that's like, just as somebody, as a, you know, art, we're seeing connections between disparate things, and just as a thing, I
It's
think it
maybe the same
connects.
as back at the
Yeah.
museum, as you said. It's
Yeah.
the father and the son explaining the story. In this case, Bill Arnett and somebody like Joe Minter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in creating visibility, in creating
Yeah.
dissemination.
And Jane Fonda.
therefore
And
meaning-
Jane Fonda.
Yeah, Jane
I don't
Fonda,
know
yeah,
if you
I didn't
catch
get that.
that.
No.
So Jane Fonda has given millions of dollars, at least $1 million that I know of, to the Souls Grown Deep Foundation.
Okay.
And if you know, maybe you know Lonnie Holly's music.
No.
There's an artist who's also from Alabama who's younger than Joe Minter, but he has 1 or 2 music albums, and then he also makes sculptures. And Jane Fonda's like a huge fan of his, so
Okay.
there's like all these. You can find like a Getty image of like Jane Fonda and Lonnie Holly. Yeah, and it's like, why should that be funny? But it fucking
That's great.
is.
Sure.
And he's laughing at
Barbarella.
it too. So that's what he's saying. So they came in a bus.
Right.
There's another recording. They came to his place
Okay.
in a bus to look, right? And what he's essentially talking about is optics and representation.
Yeah.
And when you hear it from this perspective, like the choice that I want myself in a museum, and I'm the same way as anybody takes an opportunity that, oh, should I really do this? Is this the best way? This person also has that right. Yeah. So that's what he's talking about in to me in this part. And there's some interesting things when you listen closely. I've listened to this a bunch of times, so I don't know if you caught it, but he's talking about how Bill Arnett came to decide to start looking at this work again. And he said, oh yeah, he was looking through a magazine or something and sees these quilts. So he's talking about the G's Benz quilts, right? And those are quilts made by women in G's Ben, and they were shown, like, I guess probably late 80s, because when I was in art school, the older teachers loved to show that as like a, wow, other people make abstract, you know,
Right.
Here's Albers, kind of, right? You know, so it's interesting to see how
That amateurism also, no? Or the idea
and the
that
primitivism and the outsider, insider,
Yeah,
and
whatever.
we
There's
address
a lot
that
of terms
later.
for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of terms for it, but it's just interesting to see essentially the sort of lens that a lot of these artists have been seen through. And for me, it was really great to experience the work firsthand, because it's like really good sculpture. You know, however you cut it. I mean, it's very good sculpture. So that was also great. Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna leave with Joe Minter.
All right, let's do that.
Maybe also to sort of give an introduction to the final track.
Okay.
You're in his house now?
We're outside. So we're
Sorry,
at his
outside
house.
his house.
Yeah, we're at his house. Everything that he has made is outdoors. Like what the public can see is outside. So we're sitting in a sort of we're sitting in a like gazebo that he made himself. And
Okay.
so you can hear the bugs. Maybe if you hear some clanging, it's like chimes he made.
And you also hear like a constant sound. What's he doing?
He is folding a small paper man, like 2-part paper little figure. And he learned how to do that when he was in school. If you listen to the end of the recording, he describes some of his experience in school and how he learned to do that. But he's, making his own art supplies, you know?
Before I turn it on, maybe a final thought for now, at least.
Mm-hmm.
What this all could lead to.
Oh, well, I mean,
Is there anything you dare say about that?
I mean, work-wise, I don't have specifics. He says something really exciting in this recording about working outside, and he also, in another part, talks about letting God's color get on it. And I'm not religious. Just keep that in mind. Don't worry.
Don't worry.
No, but as far as how this manifests, for me, I found a lot of affirmation in this whole trip. Like I feel really connected to this way of working. And that for me, of course, when you find that kind of affirmation gives like, yeah, momentum. But
Yeah.
I don't really have a direct answer on where it will lead. I hope to figure out a way to get this audio to the public in a legible way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe some kind of publication with also audio and transcribed, so it's
Yeah.
easier. Yeah.
Thanks so much for bringing the audio here, at
Yeah.
least first, so we
I'm
could
very
sort of
excited.
give a shot at it.
Yeah. Thank you for having it.
It was a pleasure.
Art is warm. It's a gift that God gives you to be able to express that part of Him that is a mystery. See, art is some of God's mystery. He give people lots of mystery. The ones that He know gonna use them for the good.
This is a nice thing you made here. That's complicated.
And I'm telling you, dear. How do I remember? I'm 80 years old. How do I remember this?
Are you 89 or 80?
80. I was born in 43.
Okay. I thought you were 89. I've been out here spreading it. I've been making it even bigger. I say he's 89 years old and
Put some age to me. Age I don't deserve yet. I just crossed the line to be an elder, an African elder, really.
How old do you think I am?
That what?
I'm 34.
Did I get you?
Yeah.
I know I got you. I ain't have to look long either. Can I tell you your face, tell you your whole story?
Yeah.
I bet you went to the house and then you do what I told you.
I did do it. I told you I
did.
did
You get
it.
out of it.
Well,
do you get more pleasure out of smiling, or do you get more pleasure out of frowning up?
no, I get more pleasure out of smiling.
Yeah. What would I do?
What's gonna happen here?
What part I got there?
I think this is, wait a second. This we got, what I thought is, you got the middle part here.
Mm-hmm. Hold now. Hold on there.
Oh, believe me, I'm not rushing you. Take your
I did
time.
that right. I'm supposed to be wrong in there.
What do we got here? Some legs.
That's wide. That's it.
Oh, that's smart. Joe, that's smart.
Need a piece of Scotch tape or something really.
I got some tape in the car. I got masking tape.
Just when you get time, I'm just gonna give it to you like this.
Oh, you don't want me to tape it up now?
You can do it later, cause you know you can make no trip, but you can put a head on or anything you want to put on.
That's a nice outfit too.
Well, all you need, you can put your head anything on it. Then I tell
That
you,
looks
man,
pretty good.
Then I tell you, a man can make a man.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see how many folds and
Mhm.
twists and tearing?
I thought I didn't know where we were going actually, but I
Now
trusted
Joe gonna
you.
ride with you from now on, cause that's Joe. Not Joe, but that's the peacemaker.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
That's the peacemaker.
That looks pretty good, Joe. And I like that pinstripe suit, don't you?
There had to be something that the teachers taught us with just what they had in there.
Yeah,
Think about you could get a sheet of paper anyway.
yeah.
So making your own art supply.
And books and things like this, you had the old books or you had good
Wrote
books?
through with all kind of names and half of the pages ripped out. State books, we didn't have a chance. But the teacher, the scheme of a teacher was right up on that board. The first thing you're gonna see is character development.
Mm.
Then you're gonna have what you call do unto others you haven't done to you.
Mm-hmm.
23rd song, and have what it takes to bring you together in harmony to be able to say, I love everything in here. I'm gonna show you on that
All right, let's go
foot over
look.
there. Cause it kind of getting in the neck and it's
Mhm.
getting in the darkness.
We better go.
Tipping in the darkness.
We better go over there. Look at all my things.
When you get time to put your piece of.
I will. But I'm going to keep this out.
You want me to tote that for you? That what you're gonna have to make too.
Mm-hmm. I got lots of assignments now. You gave me
Is that
lots.
what you come here for?
Yes, actually.